Welcome to the Photoshop training channel. Today, by popular demand, we have another Photoshop 3D tutorial. I've been getting a lot of emails and Facebook messages asking me to do more 3D tutorials, so today we'll look into creating this picture frame completely in 3D and incorporating it into the stock image of a living room table. We'll start out with this image I took while at dinner a few weeks back. Then we'll add a white border which will become the frame. We'll turn this image into a 3D object, and then we will change the extrusion depth and add a bevel to the image. Using contours, we'll add the appropriate shape to the picture frame, and then, using materials, we can apply the appropriate colors. We'll complete the effect by placing the picture frame within the background image and apply the appropriate lighting and reflections to make it as realistic as possible. Before we get started, however, I want to make sure that you're all seeing what I'm seeing. So, go into Window, Workspace, and make sure 3D is checked, and click on Reset 3D to reset all your panels so that are aligned in this fashion here. Okay, let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is open up my image. So I'm going to go to File, Open, and open this image titled Picture. And this is a picture I took with my cell phone in San Francisco, right outside of a restaurant called Cliff House in San Francisco, California. It's a really nice restaurant with a great view, and I did not Photoshop it. It was just a beautiful sunset, and I decided to take a picture. So what we're going to do with this picture is create a frame around it in 3D, and we're going to place it into a scene so it looks like a picture frame laying on a table. So the first step is to create the actual frame. So to do that, I'm going to extend my canvas 100 pixels in each direction. To do that, I'm going to go into Image, Canvas Size, and my width is 1097 and my height is 617. Now I can do the math and I can just add 200 pixels to 1097, which will be 1297, and add 200 pixels to 617, which would be 817. But there's an easier way to do this. You don't have to do the math. If you just click on the relative checkbox, you can just add those 200 pixels, and notice that Photoshop did the math for us and automatically added that. If that wasn't there, you can just simply add 200 and then leave your anchor point to the center and make sure your canvas extension color is set to white and press OK. And that adds 100 pixels on each side, on the top, the bottom, left, and right. So we're going to use this white space to create the frame in 3D. I'm going to click on my layers panel and notice that everything is in one single layer and it's in a background layer which is locked, which is what you want to have. If you have different layers or it's not a background layer that's locked, simply go into Layer, Flatten Image. After that, go under the 3D menu and click on New 3D Extrusion from selected layer, and it's going to turn this layer into a 3D layer. And by the way, I'm going to press Ctrl S or Command S to save, since it's always a good idea to save as you're working, especially in 3D. Okay, so now that I have everything is saved, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click on my scale tool, which is this one right here, the one that's got the icon of a camera. I'm going to come to the bottom left inside of this square, and I'm going to click and drag to zoom out, like so. So that way I have some space and I can work with this. Then I'm going to click on my rotate tool, and I'm going to rotate the image just a little bit just so you can see what's going on. So notice that this is now a 3D object, and what we want to do is we want to flatten this, and then we're going to use this white space and turn that into a picture frame. So the next step is to click on the background layer, and we're going to change the extrusion depth to 0. Click on the background layer once again, and notice that this flattens. If I rotate the image, if I come into the square and rotate, notice that it now looks like a flat piece of paper, which is what you want. Then we gotta make an extrusion out of the white part of this image. To do that, I'm gonna click on Cap, and we get these HUDs, heads up displays, and you can click and drag these to create different inflations or bevels or angles. The one we're going to be using for this tutorial is the bevel width. So click on the left yellow icon here, click and drag that to the right, and you'll notice that the image will start popping out like so. Once you go past the edge of the image just a little bit, stop there. In this case, it was 26.6. You can use this if you like, or you can use the bevel width here on the side. So you can click and drag this if you wanted to, but I'll leave it at 26. And I'm going to go ahead and rotate that just so you can see what that did. It just extruded that out. Okay. The next step is we got to create the edges and grooves that picture frames have. To do that, you're going to use the contour tool here, and you can click on each one of these and notice that you get a different 3D extrusion depending on which one of these you click. You can actually this is essentially a curves layer, so you can double click on these and then click and drag the points if you wanted to. But then what I'm going to use is the one here on the bottom right. This one here called rounded edges. I'm going to click on that and notice that it now looks more like a picture frame, as you can see there. And what I'm going to do now is I gotta give this a material that looks like wood. To do that, I'm going to click on my background front bevel, this layer here, and I'm going to select this material right here in the bottom right called wood redwood. If you don't see it, click on the flyout menu and select default, and then just press OK. And you don't have to save your current materials if you don't want to. I'm not going to. I'm just going to click no. It's going to look the same for me because I was already in the default materials. But once you set your default materials, select the one in the bottom right here, and notice that it immediately applies that material to the extrusion. You can use whichever one you like, any of these others, but I found that this material looks better in this particular effect. Now that we have this selected, our frame is pretty much completed. We're going to make a few changes in a little bit. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring in the background. So I'm going to go into File, Place, and I'm going to select the background image and click on Place. My background image is not as big as my background, so I'm just going to hold Shift, Alt, and click and drag one of the corners to scale this image so it fits into my background. Press Enter. Go into my Layers panel, and I'm going to click and drag the background image above my frame, and I'm going to rename this layer Frame, just so I can reference it better as I'm talking to you guys. I'm also going to press Control S on my PC, or you can press Command S on your Mac to save the image. And what we have to do now is we got to place this image better onto our composition. I'm going to double click on my frame 3D layer, and what I have to do now is I have to make sure that this ground plane matches my background. So I'm going to click and drag on this square and move my ground plane around. The first thing I need to do is make sure that my horizon line, which is this gray line here, matches the background's horizon line. I don't really know where the horizon is on this background image, but I know that it's somewhere in this general area, so that's okay, I'll leave it there. Next, I gotta make sure that these lines, and actually let me move this to the side so you can see better. These lines have to somewhat match the vanishing point of this image, so you can tell where the vanishing point is if you follow this line here and you follow the edge of the table here to somewhere around this point. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to match one of these lines to follow the line here. So I'm just going to click and drag that to the side there, and I know my horizon line is moving, but I can bring that back up. And if this square is a little too hard for you to work with, click anywhere outside the background layer, like here, and you'll notice this selection around the canvas, and you can just click and drag back here if it's any easier for you. So I'll try that. So somewhere along there, notice that my horizon line is back where it was, and this line is following more or less the perspective of this image. Again, you don't have to be perfect. As long as you get it close enough, you'll be able to fake the effect. Then I'm going to click on my drag 3D tool and drag this down to place it closer to the actual table, so the picture frame looks like it's sitting on the table. So now that this is pretty much where I want it, I'm going to click on my frame. I'm going to move it along the Z-axis to move it back, and then move it this way a little bit. And it's a little too wide, so I'm just going to scale that down. So I'm going to scale it on the y-axis just a little bit, bring it this way like so. I'm just clicking the yellow box here and then clicking and dragging to the left like so to bring the scale in a little bit. And I probably will move it back along the z-axis just a little more and move it on the x-axis to the right a little bit. Also, now that it's here, I'm going to rotate it. I don't want it looking straight at me, so what I'll do is I'll rotate it a little bit to the right like so, and I'll rotate it back as well. Oops, actually that's not rotating it back, that's rotating it side to side. I'll rotate it back a little bit because picture frames are usually kind of leaning back a little bit like that. So I'm going to go ahead and deselect that, and as long as you're on the edge of the table, you're fine. I'm going to press Ctrl S to save once again. Actually, everything's looking pretty good, but I still think that I'm a little too close to the edge of the table, so I'm going to click on it again and move it back like so. And I'm just looking for a good place to put this. Maybe here. We'll just put it there on the edge of the table, and that's where we'll leave it. And I'm going to click on my marquee tool to get rid of all my 3D tools. I'm going to make a selection around my 3D image, and I'm going to do a quick render just to see what we got. Okay, so now that we did this render, there are several problems with the image. Number one, the image is looking a little washed out, so we have to fix that. The shadow's not quite matching our scene, so we have to fix that. And we have to add a reflection, like everything else in the scene has a reflection on the table, so we have to add that same reflection here. So let's take care of one problem at a time. First, let's fix the way this image looks. To fix this, we're going to click on our front inflation, and we're going to change our shine to 100%. And that gives it the contrast it originally had, and it makes the image look much better. Next, we have to fix the shadow. If you notice in our scene, there's not really any shadows anywhere on the table, at least. Maybe just some shadows here under this, but not really. So I think it'd be best if we just get rid of the shadow. So I'm going to click on the environment, and I'm going to click on my shadow's opacity and just take that down to 0%. I'm going to scroll down here, and we need some reflections. So I'm going to add a reflection. We'll make it around 46% or so. And if I click and drag and render this, you'll see that the reflection starts appearing on the table. Now the problem with this reflection is that it's very sharp, and it goes off to the edge of the table here onto the bottom, and even a little bit on the floor, so we got to fix that. But before we do that, let's try to match this reflection to the reflection of everything else on the table. One way of doing that is to increase the roughness. So I'm going to increase the roughness about 16 or so percent. I'm going to go ahead and render this once again just so we can see what we're working with and we make the appropriate changes. Okay, so this reflection is looking much better. I think it might be just a little too rough, so I'll just make this 12%, and I'm just gonna render just the reflection. I'll just do it a little bit faster this time. I'm just gonna stop it there. I don't really need to render this side. I saw how this side looks, and it's looking pretty good. It's pretty much what I wanted, so I'm just gonna leave it there for now. But feel free to play around in your composition if you want to. Okay, so the next step is to hide the reflection off the edge of the table. So to do that, we're going to go into our layers panel. Under frame 3D layer, we're going to add a layer mask, and I'm just going to draw with a black soft brush on the bottom here, just like so, just deleting those pixels. Maybe I'll make a better transition there. Actually, I'm going to fill it with white now and just kind of bring some of that I took away that I think I need. And that's what our reflection looks like there. It's looking pretty good. Now, one of the things we have to do now to match this scene, to match this 3D object to our scene a little bit better, is match the color of the wood. So I want to take the colors from here and put them on our frame. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my eyedropper tool and select one of the bright colors here. And actually the reason I'm not getting a color here is because I'm on my layer mask. I'm just going to click on the actual layer, or better yet on the background layer, and select one of these lighter colors, something like that. And for my background color, I'll select one of the darker colors, maybe that color there, and I'll press OK. So we have our light color and our dark color, and we're going to use these in a moment. Now I'm going to double click on my 3D layer. I'm going to click on the background front bevel, and under diffuse I'm going to click on this icon and click on edit texture. And this is our texture here. This is what's creating the wood in that texture. And by the way, a little quick tip here. I'm going to show you how this was created. I'm just going to turn off all the smart filters, and I'm going to turn that layer off. So the designer that created this, all they did is created this white square. Then they added fibers, motion blur, a zigzag effect, and polar coordinates to create that texture. Then they added a gradient adjustment layer to give it its color. So what we're going to do is we're just going to change the gradient map. And by the way, I'm going to click on the icon here so I can see the colors over here. Earlier I was on my layer mask, which gives me just black and white. But if I click on the icon here, I get the colors I selected just a moment ago. So I'm going to double click on this gradient editor. I'm going to double click on the lighter reddish swatch here, and I'm going to select the lightest color. Press OK. And I'll do the same for the darkest color and click on the background color here. Now I'm noticing that there's not much contrast, so maybe I want to just darken it up just a little bit. See how that works. Then I'll press OK. I'm going to press Control S or Command S on the Mac to save. Then I'm going to go into my layer here, which is the picture PSD. And notice the color changed a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and render that and see how that's going to look. Just going to stop it there. The colors are better, but they're still not quite there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make them just a little bit lighter. Maybe the lightest color needs to be just somewhat lighter. And this one as well. I'm just kind of eyeballing it here. And you might have to play around a little bit to get the right colors going there. And by the way, I just pressed Control S. And I'm going to go back and select my picture layer. And it's still not looking the way I want to. You know what I just noticed is that there's this weird shadow thing here. I'm not exactly sure what that is, so let's figure that out. I'm guessing that's part of my environment. Well, I don't think it's my shadow because my shadow is there. Let me see if it's my reflection. So I'm gonna just shut that down. Yeah, and that's my reflection. I'm not exactly sure what's causing that. Okay, so I think the problem is the infinite light. So let me just move this even though we shut the shadows off. And yeah, that's what the problem was. There was this weird glitch going on here. I know we turned off the shadows, but the infinite light was still showing. So I just had to move that just a little bit. And you know what? Now that I did that, let me just fix the light here because we do need to fix the lighting for this scene. The light's coming from this window, so it's probably going to be lit, you know, something like... something like that, I would say. And I'm going to click on my marquee tool. I'm going to do a quick render just to see how everything is looking. And it's still a little dark here at the bottom, so I might want to fix my infinite light again. So I'm going to click on that and just line it up a little bit, maybe like that. And you know what? Now that we've been working with this, I feel like I have to move this back just a little bit. Just like it's too close to the edge. Maybe something like that, I would say. And make sure that this is on the table, that it's not like going all the way down like so. So maybe like right on the ground plane, like right there, something like that. So I'm gonna render this once again. Yeah, and I think this is looking much better. I like this position better. I like the reflection better. And I think things are looking pretty good. The only thing I would do now is maybe try to match these colors just a little bit more. I'm not going to take the time to do that. You saw how we were doing that earlier just by clicking on that gradient map. So you can keep doing that if you want. I'm just going to stop there. Now another thing you can do is you can go back into your layers panel and you can add an adjustment layer to the background. For example, you can add a curves adjustment layer. and do the S-curves that I love so much. You probably see me do them in just about every tutorial. I just like to use them to give contrast to images, and I can do the same thing to the frame layer. So I'll add another one, but this time I'll add a clipping mask. I'll hold Alt in between both layers until I get the down pointing arrow with the square next to it. That's Option on the Mac, by the way, and then I click in between both of them to create that adjustment layer, and then you see this little down pointing arrow here, and you can make adjustments to the frame layer as well. And if you wanted to, you could also control the colors of it here. And although I like the way this is looking, it might be a little too much contrast, so I'm just gonna bring the opacity down and leave it there. And this is the result. This is how you create a picture frame in 3D and add it into an image. And that's it for this tutorial. As always, I hope you enjoyed it and that you learned something new. Leave any comments or questions down below, or head over to my Facebook page and leave them there if you like. Also, feel free to share with me any designs you come up with using this technique. I would love to see your stuff. And don't forget to subscribe to my free newsletter where I provide subscriber-only content. Just enter your email address in the box on the top right side of my website, photoshoptrainingchannel.com. Once again, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you guys again soon.